Hi, my name is Thea Lux, and I like art that is therapeutic.
Welcome to the Finding Favorites podcast, where we explore your favorite things without using an algorithm. Here's your host, Leah Jones.
Hello and welcome to Finding Favorites. I'm your host, Leah Jones. It is Sunday, November 1st. Daylight savings time started or ended yesterday. I don't know. Spring forward, fall back. We fell back. So it's been dark since 5 p.m. already in Chicago. Today I was able to vote. I had been planning on early voting this whole time, and the clock was ticking on my ability to early vote. Election day is on Tuesday, or shall we say the final day of the election is on Tuesday, and then the counting begins. So I went over to Mather High School, which is the early voting spot in my ward, and was able to place my vote. It was a really exciting day. Of course, I voted for Biden and Harris on the top of the ticket. Used the Girl, I Guess progressive guide for help understanding the rest of the ballot, and also voteforjudges.com. If you're in Chicago, it's really important to look at judge retention advice. It is complex. I think a lot of times we either vote yes on everyone, no on everyone, or just skip the judges portion. But there are a lot of bar associations and people out there trying to make voting for judges easier. So yeah, I used Vote for Judges and then the Girl, I Guess guide for progressives. So I voted, and then we drove out to Culver's in the suburbs and had democracy milkshakes. Other than that, just staying home. That's what I do. This conversation today is with Thea Lux. I will link to all things Thea in the show notes. Thea and I knew each other. You'll hear us talk a little bit about the open mics that overlapped for us when we were baby comics in Chicago. And we have just followed each other on social media and see each other in Facebook groups and on Twitter and Instagram, all the places ever since. And she's actually one of the first people I told about my podcast and tried to get her to interview. And she very kindly, gently said no. And then I've been following her adventures in knitting during COVID. And so I asked her very specifically, instead of an open-ended, what's your favorite thing? I said, will you come on my podcast and talk about the sweaters you've been knitting? So that's what we talk about. We talk about a little bit about the comedy and voiceover industry, which is why she moved out to LA. And then we talk a lot about knitting and projects and learning to use patterns. And what do you do when you realize that you have made a mistake? And are you willing to start over? Which I think is a big kind of existential question that we get into. So I hope that you have your meal plan for the week. It's going to be a stressful week. Like I said, the election voting ends on Tuesday, but we won't know the final results for a couple weeks. So everything doesn't go back to normal on Tuesday. It's just the next chapter. And I think it's really important that we don't get lazy in the future, that we take the things we've learned over the last 4 years and keep pushing forward with them. It's going to be tempting. Man, is it going to be tempting just to return to a life of Netflix and chill if Biden wins. But we can't. Biden is our opportunity to take a deep breath and then keep pushing for positive change in the world. But until we get there, make a plan to vote. If you already voted, check in with your friends and make sure they're voting. And then, stay home, stay safe, wear your mask, and wash your hands. Have a good week. Hello and welcome to Finding Favorites. I'm your host, Leah Jones. This is the podcast where we get recommendations from people and talk about their favorite things without getting an algorithm. I am really excited today. I am joined by Thea Lux. How are you, Thea?
Good. As good as can be.
Yeah. You're like election COVID adjusted wellness level.
Yeah, I'm distracted. I think that's the adjective that I can use the most.
Yeah. Thea is a comedian, writer, artist based in LA and a former comic of the week on the Jackie and Laurie show. And I'll link to all of these things in the show notes. But Thea and I knew each other originally from open mics 100 years ago, right?
100 years ago this day.
Yes. I think we knew each other from the Tequila Roadhouse. Is that where we used to see each other?
Probably. I mean, those were sort of like the improv bar jam things.
Yeah.
I was there for sure.
Yeah. So Tequila Roadhouse was I think a Sunday night improv, or like it was an improv and stand-up open mic, which were rare that they were both together. And at the time I was trying to do stand-up comedy, and the open mic started after The Sopranos. So people would watch The Sopranos in the bar and then go to the back room for the show.
But would they go back to see the show?
No. I mean, the comedians would go to the back and
I got it.
Yeah. No, we never had a normal person in the audience. No. It was 100% comedians performing for comedians.
That's about right.
Yeah. So when did you make the move to LA?
Back in 2015.
Okay.
Was probably too late because they don't like people over 22, I think. I think that's what they've been telling me so far. Not sure.
Yeah. They don't like women over 22, that's
women,
for sure.
Yeah. They don't like women. They don't like white women anymore. Well, that's progressive, though. That's progress.
You're right. Right. What's it like living in LA versus Chicago?
There's a really big shift for having like theater be such a part of my life back in Chicago. Storefront theater, if you're not in a show, you just create your own storefront theater. And going from your day job to whether it's improv or stand-up or theater, whatever it is, like, not that you can't do improv or stand-up out here, but theater is either equity or the Fringe Festival. And it hurts my heart that you move to LA and you stop acting, basically. That's the sadness that I think is associated with the city. But we have sunshine.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, there's so much, people won't be able to see this, but in the video of the Zoom, there's so much sun behind you.
Yep. It's, I think it's 87 degrees outside right now, but that's not a good thing because it's October 30th.
Right. It does seem a little hot for late October.
It is. But it's pretty normal. I remember the first year we moved out here, October 1st had like 100 degrees. And I was like, this is broken?
Right. Yeah, I feel like I've heard other people, specifically Chicago theater people, tell that story of, in Chicago, there's every empty storefront in Chicago is a future theater, essentially. And so is like every finished basement, every unfinished basement that you move to LA to continue your acting career. And it's just such a complete, I don't think 180 is even the right way to describe it, but they do have,
I'm sorry to interrupt. They do have some theaters out here, like 99 seat theaters. But that's the whole thing. You got to find the part, you got to determine if you can drive there at the time. I directed a fun show at the Fringe Festival last year, and found out that I was like, oh, this is when the LA theater community comes together. And it does, but it's explicitly the LA Fringe community. So it's really just the people who do Fringe go see the Fringe show. It's not like in New York where New York goes to see Fringe theater. It's like everyone who's in that community already. And I was like, oh man, LA still doesn't really care. Cool.
Right.
Noted.
Yeah, it's not like the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, which is like an international destination for theater goers, for people who care about culture.
Right.
And the artists. So, man, that's different. It's also different. On a couple of trips out to LA, on one trip, I went and saw like Kyle Kinane at an open mic, tracked him down before he got bigger in just a tiny, I'm going to say like a 20 chair room somewhere. And another trip, probably 5 years ago, at least, if not more, I found like Robert Buscemi at an open mic where he was hosting an open mic at like a sports bar. But it's really, the thing about, I think, doing comedy on the north side of Chicago, because I never did comedy on the south side, is that things are close together. An evening, you could plan a night with like a couple open mics. At least now you can, because now there's like 5 open mics a night in Chicago, or not now, but it's very different. But LA is like, where is the place you're going to today?
Yeah, you can do 2 mics a night stand up in LA. You can do 3.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but you would have to do it like, they have this thing where you can book hour slots at some mics. So a mic might have 5 slots a night, and then you'll just have 9 people on the bill. The room clears out and you go in, which is really efficient if you want to just do 2 mics. And then if you want to make the late night mic, head to that. Like, that's always an option. But I think whenever I was in Chicago doing mics, like I would go to Lottie's right after work, have dinner there, because the list would come out and there would always already be like 25 people.
Right.
And I was just like, this is an entire evening. But that was fine because I was drinking at the time, and you just drink and eat dinner and do your 5 minutes and then bike home. It was definitely different.
Yeah, very different. When I, a couple summers ago, was like, maybe in my 40s, I have more to say on stage and I want to do this again. It was very weird being like the oldest person in the room.
Yep.
And because of the online sign up, that people don't stay at an open mic all night anymore. That it's, you get there right before yours and you leave right after. And I was just like, how do you build a community if nobody stays at an open mic? And I mean, you build it online, I guess. But that was the thing I found the most bizarre was, you go to the Lion's Den, you'd put your name in the picture, you'd stay for 18 hours. It was like a 5-hour open mic, a 7-hour open mic. And that was all you did on a Monday night. And it's really weird to me how the digital sign up, more rooms, digital sign up, how much more movement in an evening can be.
I feel like the hangouts, at least out here, happen after the mic, after the room clears out, and there will be a circle of comedians who go to that mic regularly, and then they disperse.
Yeah.
If you go enough, that's your community.
Right. Yeah. And then I think I felt like, I was like, oh, I also know how I felt about like the one weird old lady who came to mics when I was in my 20s. And I was like, now I'm her. And I'm going on stage and I'm talking about a hysterectomy. And these people still don't know how biology works. And I feel weird and old and I need to leave.
Yeah, I hear that. I think I had some material about just like wrinkles and how my neck is looking strange. And that's never done well. And I don't, whether it's the lack of jokes or the lack of understanding or the lack of me not necessarily looking like an old hag, I'm not sure which combination it is, but I'm like, okay, fine. I'll stick to the mystery age that you think I am, I guess.
Right. You do like voiceover, or you've been working on a voiceover reel? Basic things I know about you from the internet.
I will do voiceover when it comes my way. Basically, like I have all the reels and the agents that submit me, and I do the auditions. I just recently, it was released just last Thursday called Like Mother. Allison Stevenson wrote an audible script. So it's kind of like a narrated, not narrated, what's it
like
called?
Like a radio drama?
Yeah, basically. And it has, what's her name? Curb Your Enthusiasm, Susan Essman, is that her name? Susie Essman. Nice. So it's about her and her mother and growing up and issues with their relationship and being fat and being sexual and being nervous and anxiety and all of those things.
Cool. So you were a voice.
Yeah, I played a few voices in that. I think I was the tattoo artist and the Orange County housewife television voice or something like that. Nice. Just what this kind of voice says. Oh my God.
That's cool. Because that seems like it wasn't as much in the mix for people in Chicago. I knew a couple people who did voiceover reels, but that seems like a market that opens up once you get to LA. That's not super open in Chicago.
I think it's actually harder to get a voiceover agent out here.
Oh.
If you're ever trying to break into voiceover, just go to classes, get a reel, and practice commercial copy all the time, because the way that the industry right now is going, they're going to use youth for youth voices, and they're going to use super celebrity comedians for animation. So one teacher I had said, you don't age out of voiceover. So it's harder to get those animation roles. Those are the really coveted ones. So if you want to be in animation, just be friends with Nick Kroll.
Yeah.
That's what I'm going to do.
Go back in time, go to UCB and get really into gardening now and get in through his girlfriend. I don't pay any attention to him online.
That sounds great.
I didn't ask you here just to talk about comedy in LA and the industry, because I didn't. I asked you here to talk about one of your favorite things. And since COVID in March, I noticed on Instagram, you started knitting.
I specifically, I started knitting sweaters because prior to this whole quarantine, I had only made scarves. And I think it's just, there's no live comedy.
Right.
I host a Zoom open mic on Wednesdays, but that's an hour. And the anxiety for me has been, I need to do things with my hands, and I need to either make crafts or knit or bake or those kind of things that produce things and can be done in a short amount of time. You need to be able to complete the project, or if it's an extended amount of time, it needs to be something that you can do in front of the TV, basically.
Yeah. Because you do tiny hot dogs.
I do tiny hot dogs. Yes.
Is that
I guess I should explain that. That doesn't really mean anything to other people. I make tiny polymer clay hot dogs, miniature food that you can put on pins and magnets. You can find it on Etsy or Instagram at Hot Dog City USA. And that is, I find hot dogs funny. So they are part of a small hot dog based art thing I do.
That's awesome. And then, so that was the crafting I saw that you did online. And then, COVID, you started knitting sweaters.
Yes.
So when did you learn how to knit? Or are you a knit and crocheter or just knitting?
I'm both. I started with crocheting, and I want to say that my grandmother or my mom taught me, because my grandmother was a big crocheter. And then I think maybe in high school or junior high, my parents won a silent auction, and knitting lessons were part of it. And so I learned from someone at church how to knit. And I think in Chicago, I would just knit everyone I knew, you start dating someone and you knit them a scarf.
Yeah.
Like, I love you. Here's a scarf. And then I would make Afghans over the course of what's it called? Over winter,
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like my art has gone from big, like I have pop art paintings that are just like huge. And then whenever you make art, you have to keep it or
Right.
find someone who wants it.
Right.
And so it's just like the art I wanted to make a little smaller. So I've made 1, 2, 3, 4. I've made so many Afghans, and eventually you just can't keep them in your house.
Yeah. How many trunks can you have?
Exactly. Oh man, not enough steamer trunks. But yeah, so that was, sweaters are the big things that I'm making right now.
Yeah.
Afghans.
And was your grandma because my grandma also she's who taught me how to crochet, but she did lace. She was always, or like with the, lace. She crocheted these like very intricate tablecloths and doilies and
Totally into doilies. I think my grandmother was. Yeah.
Yeah. There was always a project. I never learned how to do that type of crocheting, but she just thought it was a life skill. It was a life skill. Knowing how to crochet was a life skill.
Yeah. I remember my grandmother making dad's side was a Catholic. So there were many, many aunts and uncles and cousins. So every cousin generally got like a crocheted ornament. So on my Christmas tree today, there's still like Grandma Rita Christmas things. And I think my other grandmother crocheted too. I think that's just, you're right. It was a life skill that women of a certain age did.
And so you were doing scarves and Afghans. And then, so for you, were sweaters just, it's a way to get your hands moving. There's a project with an end to it. It's wearable, although you're in California. So how wearable are they?
Exactly. That's a thing. Like in Chicago, making these Afghans and stuff, I probably stopped doing fiber art stuff for several years because you don't need that big Afghan sitting on you in the winter. So I think I tried embroidery.
Okay.
And then I kind of shifted into that. And that actually led to the tiny hot dogs. And then pandemic, it just, I don't know about you, but it's like, it's interesting to see what is surviving and what is keeping us alive during these times. Like the things that made us happy before don't necessarily make me happy now.
Yeah.
Because they're just different. Stand up. I feel like I'm on a work meeting if I do a Zoom stand-up show. It's way different. The writing process is totally different. The response is like altered.
Yeah.
So it doesn't bring the same amount of joy that it used to. And writing is a chore always, pre-pandemic or not. And so it's just these things that like are keeping us sane are different, I think. How are you coping?
Well, I started a podcast. I think I started this. Huh?
Can I be on that podcast?
You can be on a podcast. Yeah. I think I got to May and I had rewatched Gilmore Girls. So at the beginning, I was watching TV I'd already seen before.
Yes. We
game shows, low stakes, nothing scary, reading absolutely nothing. Going deep on podcast archives and playing match 3 games on my phone.
Mm-hmm.
Like that was the first few months. And then I made a mind map about how I got into listening to podcasts. And a friend saw that and he drew one about how he got into, this is a friend who's like a lawyer and union organizer in Boston. So he drew one about how Best Week Ever got him into all the comedy he's into today. And when he drew that, I was like, you know what, maybe this is actually a podcast topic of, and then later I realized it's also just totally ripping off Dork Forest and High and Mighty. Like it's
what we love.
Yeah. But I'm not,
I was on the train 2 hours a day before.
Mm-hmm.
So that's eventually I had to find something to do with all the extra time I was home that wasn't just playing Best Fiends.
Yeah, it's like people are always like, self-care, self-care, self-care. And to an extent, I agree. But then I feel like I do need to make progress, or else I'm just going to be dormant this entire time, just gripping, the seats of like an airplane and just waiting for it to be over. And there are people making progress. I'm like, well, we still have to use art in our lives somehow. Why don't I have that desire anymore?
Yeah, it is. It's hard. I did pick up I think I've got a Sid Field, his screenwriter's workbook. I picked that up, and I've got this idea that I've been kicking around. I think for 15 years, that's gone from being a drama to a screwball comedy, a mistaken identity screwball comedy instead of a mistaken identity true crime drama. So I had a lot of energy, and I worked on that one day for 45 minutes. And then I poured a cup of coffee on the workbook, and I was like, maybe I'm not writing a screenplay anymore.
Isn't that funny how it works? I sometimes have to talk myself out of I'll be going through patterns or yarn. I'm like, this project needs to be made now. I need to go buy the supplies now. And if it sticks with me for more than one day or whatever, then I'll kind of revisit it. But sometimes it's just that it's absolutely a coping mechanism of just, this will make me happy. This will block out the pandemic. And it's not, it keeps me occupied.
Right.
But the pandemic is still happening and I'm still sad. It's like I'm going la, 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 la. It will, as the world is on fire.
I also, I bought a car during this. I haven't had a car since I lived in Chicago. And the first thing I did was I was like, all right, where are the places I can buy supplies and take them to people? Because now I have a car and I can actually give the type of donation or do some acts of mutual aid that need a car to happen. So I did that.
But have you used your car very much? Because I called up my car insurance and I was like, hey, can you reduce my rates? Because I will be using my car once a week.
Right. I mean, I'm not using it that much, but I am going on a couple times since I've gotten it. I've gone to Sonic. I get Sonic. I get a big strawberry limeade, and then I drive to Hyde Park and back on Lakeshore Drive.
That is a vacation. That's wonderful.
Because I hadn't seen the Loop in months.
Yeah. Yeah. It's fun or weird to see a city that's emptied out. I did a road trip on my birthday, an hour away to Portillo's, which is out by Disneyland. Yeah. I was like, this is my birthday road trip. Go through the drive-through, have a Chicago hot dog and a cake shake in the Walmart parking lot because we were like, we're going to tailgate. And then the security came up. It's like, you can't have chairs or canopies or tables. I'm like, it's my birthday lunch.
I just want to eat
literally living in their car. Come on, I love a hot dog.
How was it?
It was fantastic. It was the best quarantine birthday ever.
I love that. My birthday is March 23rd. So it was 10 days into COVID, 10 days into the shutdown. And so friends sent me balloons and cake and they tried, but I was like, this fucking sucks.
Yeah.
We hadn't figured out any new ways of being.
Yeah.
We thought our delayed, we thought we'd do things in April, right?
Yeah. That whole thinking that I remember being nervous that my company was going to go back into work about 2 months into quarantine or whatever that was, June or something. And then it's just like, no, this is a thing. This is a new thing.
We're home until June of 21 minimum.
My sister's company until August. And we're just waiting. Our company is just waiting to see what California does. I'm like, let's just look at what France and Germany are doing. Well, they're doing a lockdown now and just be like, you know what? Why don't you work remotely in whatever city you choose? Because we shouldn't go back to work.
I did quarantine. I finally built my standing desk that I'd been literally walking over the box for 2 years. So I was like, I guess I need to do this now. So
is it better?
It is. It's nice. It's I still sit at it a fair amount, but it's really nice to be able to even just to adjust it to like change my view or change where my microphone hits.
Yeah.
So, and the cats love it as a cat elevator to get them onto their very tall. I've got a cat condo on one side of the desk. So sometimes they'll come up on it and I'll raise the desk up and then they'll get on their cat condo.
I went on a deep dive of Google searches of like modern cat trees just the other day, like maybe a cat tree will make me happy. I'll buy a new cat tree that looks sleek. Maybe I'll hang it on the wall. That'll make me happy. There's some like $300, $400 like handcrafted wooden, they look like modern bookshelves.
Wow.
I was like, don't put this on a credit card. This is something you do not need. A cat sits in a box. A cat likes a cardboard box. That's all you need.
Yeah. And you probably are getting plenty of cardboard boxes in the mail.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
New cat tree every day.
One of the things that really impresses me, because I don't think I could do it, is how willing you are to rip all the stitches out and like start over, or like you're so willing to fix the sweaters.
Thank you. I have to say thank you, because my pet peeve with like Instagram and these craft communities is everything is so perfect.
Yeah.
So beautifully shot and so it's pristine, and like my crafts table is a mess and I make mistakes in my knitting and I want to be happy with something. And there have been times that, I mean, I'm wrestling with it right now. I have this sweater that I finished and it's done and I don't like it. And I don't necessarily want to give someone the sweater that I'm not happy with.
Yeah.
And but yet it's different than just throwing a loaf of bread away, which was even hard at first. When I was baking for the first time, you're like, well, it's still edible. And you're like, throw it away. You got flour. It costs $2. Like, right. But yeah, I just feel that it's very important to also let people know who are interested in trying this stuff that it does, with any skill, obviously, there's so much failure. There's so much failure. And for some reason, we're hiding it in these craft communities. And it's like, why showcase your best work? Why not just let people know, yeah, this is really hard. And I was zoning out watching British Bake Off and I miscounted a stitch. And now I have wasted 2 hours.
Yeah.
Like, let people know that no one's perfect.
I think recently you were just like, here's the mistake. Here's where I noticed it. And it was like a thrilling cliffhanger of I was like, is Thea going to go and pull them all out? Did you?
I did. It bugged me too much to just see that failure in that piece so early on. And just like, I didn't necessarily, I was knitting a Christmas stocking and I was doing a pattern for the first time. I've never done pattern knitting. And I made very apparent mistakes that made the pattern different.
Yeah.
And it just was staring me in the face. I'm like, look, I've got different needles. I know how to make this better anyway. And yeah, I took it apart, started the second one with the new needles. Everything's dandy.
Wow.
Took it apart.
That's great. And so what are you thinking about with this sweater you finished but you're unhappy with?
I wore it today to try to get myself to like it. And then I took it off and I put it in the closet and I was like, I got to think about this some more. Like this is like nitty gritty knitting stuff, but essentially I started a sweater from the bottom. I knitted up.
Okay.
And so the bottom is the start of the sweater. I didn't like the bottom, the very, very start of it, but it had been months since I had done it. So I took apart the bottom, which is incorrect. I was basically trying to do something backwards.
Okay.
And the way the yarn is woven, it's like, no, you're going against traffic. You're not doing it the right way. So I made it even harder for me to take apart the sweater. And so I tried to fix that error. So I doubled the error. And so now I just see these errors and I'm just like, of course, Googling like, crocheted cat beds or crocheted hampers so that I could easily use this yarn for something else. But it's sitting like the telltale heart in my closet right now, like an unfinished project saying, finish me or make a decision, hanging over my head.
So it's not you like the yarn you used, you like the feel. It's just
Sorta.
Oh, okay.
Sort of. That's also a part of it. This sweater was causing me so much stress and getting it off my chest. I tried an initial pattern with this yarn and I didn't like the way it looked. So I was like, okay, well, I'll salvage the yarn. I know a pattern that this will work well. And I just didn't like it again. I was like, this yarn is cursed. I think that's what it is.
So it's cursed yarn.
It's cursed yarn.
It's been through 2 sweaters now.
Yes.
And you can see errors that a non-knitter can't see.
Correct. I would bet that a non-knitter would be perfectly fine with it. I should just give it to someone or ask if anyone wants a sweater.
Yeah. Well, because when you said on Instagram that you were trying to figure out, like, can I make it into a basket? I was like, it must just be like the roughest yarn.
It's a cozy sweater.
Yeah.
It is good for Chicago winters. It's good. It just has a glaring error that I can see.
So something else that you said, and this was like how we just said, like, let's get on Zoom and do a podcast, is that you might apply that people create patterns and then they find people to test them.
Yeah.
Is that like being what does that mean?
It means that all of these fancy people who are knitting, they are, in order to make money, they sell PDFs of their patterns so that everyone can make that sweater.
Okay.
And whenever you're designing a sweater, like you would with a script, you send it to an editor, you find any mistakes, so the pattern testers are people who take the pattern they wrote, see if they can knit it. If there are any like, oh, this is confusing, or I made a mistake here, or, oh, here is something that needs clarified. Those are the people who give the feedback to the knitter.
That's cool. Do people get paid for that, or it's that you got to try this famous crafter's pattern first, or is it like?
It's probably the latter. I think it's for people who really geek out on like, we're going to knit anyway. So it's like, oh, I like that new pattern. Yes, I'd like to do it. And you get the free pattern and get to be a part of the procedure, the development of the pattern, but you still probably have to buy your own supplies.
Sure.
It's not like you're being paid, but it just seemed like, hey, you want to be part of the progress and process.
Oh, that's really neat. Because you also said about one of the sweaters you just mentioned that it was the first time you used a pattern. So did the first sweaters you made, you were just like imagined how to make, like, how do you make, first of all, I understand how patterns work. I don't totally understand how you read a knitting pattern. You don't need to teach me. But how do you knit a sweater without a pattern?
I guess I'm saying the word and meaning 2 different things. So the knitting pattern will give you directions on how to do it. So that I used initially. And then the second one, I'll say like the design pattern within it. So you ever see like zigzags or whatever, Star Wars design, like those, that is another type of pattern within the pattern.
Okay.
So that you can follow that design as you knit.
Okay, so the first sweater, you weren't just like, I think I should do 50 cast-ons and that'll be a waistband. And I'm just going to...
No, I don't know. I didn't know how to knit freehand. I can I can crochet freehand and probably like fake things. Like I've crocheted like little avocados, or I made like a flamingo, or just kind of, once you kind of know how to manipulate the stitches, you can kind of improvise.
Yeah.
and create those patterns with crochet a little more forgivingly than knitting.
Okay.
But I'm sure once I figure out, because once you figure out the parts of knitting, like any skill, you can piece things together. Like you just need to know the rules and then you can organize it on your own.
Yeah. Okay, that makes more sense. I'm still very impressed because the hardest thing I ever crocheted was an Afghan that was like a waffly pattern.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And I did that and I was like, what an accomplishment. And then I was done crocheting.
But how did you learn that stitch?
I think that stitch we did, I was in Colorado and I was working in college housing. And we, like all of the hall directors one winter, decided to learn how to crochet. And so we all did, it was like we all crocheted our own Afghans throughout the winter together. So we would go to each other's apartments to watch TV and do that pattern.
That's great. I think that, yes, my grandmother taught me how to do things, but I always say that YouTube is the new grandmother. Like,
absolutely.
Anytime I have a question about a stitch, there's so many people teaching online. It's instant, and there's some that are young, but there are some like these old ladies with their cameras and they're just like, they've been knitting for 50 years and they're like, yes, here's all my videos. I like you. No, yeah, like Ellen and like Dakota, Dakota, Illinois.
Yeah, it's absolutely where like my nephews for sure, if they want to make something, they go on YouTube and look for it. I remember my nephew, I'm going to say like 6 years ago, decided he wanted to make a duct tape wallet. And instead of
DuckTales wallet, I was like, oh, cool. What?
A DuckTales wallet would also be fantastic. But instead of looking at a wallet, he didn't have to do as much trial and error because he just went on YouTube, watched a few videos, knew the basics, and then he got to work. And it is so fascinating.
Mm-hmm. It's like, I wish that I had more space because I would love to quilt.
Yeah.
And I would love to have a wood shop. Like these are the things, like if I had a garage, I would figure out a way to make benches. I think that's probably in my future one day.
That would be, we had neighbors, I'm in a 6 flat, and the people who used to live next door were constantly, and actually the guys upstairs still do it. They find wood and they're constantly dragging wood home through the alleys and then building things. And the couple who used to live next door every weekend were setting up sawhorses in the backyard with some random thing they'd found in the alley and doing woodworking in the backyard. It was very cool.
Yeah, all of the designs I like are just like repurposed and refurbished wood. And you're just like, all I need is tools.
Right.
That's my pet peeve with everything, new art or skill that you do, is how much money you have to spend on tools, like, which you don't know. Like baking, I'm like, oh, I'm going to make French bread today. And it, it fell. Oh, you need a specific thing to help lift it up in the oven, or sourdough needs a Dutch oven, and this needs this baking mat, and knitting needs these 16 needles just so you have the option. And it's just such an investment to really pour your heart into an art that you like. Yeah, you can do it scrappy, but it's like, it does help you tremendously if you have the right tools.
It helps you tremendously. And also you're trying the craft because you admire it and you have good taste. And so you want to make things that match your taste. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's hard to do. That was something with doing the podcast that I'm sure people who listen are getting tired of hearing me say. But I just had to say, I'm going to learn in public. The sound quality is going to get better. I'm not going to edit until things are perfect. I'm going to learn this craft of interviewing and editing publicly, because otherwise I will never release a single episode.
Yep. Absolutely. I think podcasting, or like just with anything, is like, the first episodes, 10, 50, or 100, they are not going to be as good as the one you do Like my first sweater compared to the one I literally have sitting on the desk right now, the seams, you got to be kidding me. Look at this stuff. That's great. This looks like an actual sweater. I know it's dark, but it looks
like a sweater.
Which is a weird thing. This thing that I'm making, it looks like a thing I'm making.
It is. It's so true, that investment to be able, and with COVID, you can't, Chicago's got a couple maker libraries and places where we've got Lil Street Art Studio, and we have these spaces where Cowboy, sit down. So Chicago has these spaces, Lil Street Art Studio and maker libraries, where you can borrow, where you could go and do your projects somewhere else. You have to now invest and get it all in your house if you're gonna try something. Mm-hmm. There's just a lot less, I think, comfort and safety with borrowing, with going to a friend's or using their wood shop. And so I think that's one of the really hard things is now we have the really weird gift of time, but you can't borrow to make use of that time.
Yeah, we have to all be really self-contained.
Yeah. What are some projects you have on your horizon or dream, your knitting goals?
My knitting goals? I'll probably open up my Ravelry favorite list here. I want to get better at patterns, meaning like the designs and the things I'm making.
Yeah.
I recently bought very fancy yarn to make my first pair of socks.
Ooh.
I think I want to do that by the end of the year. And I think I did that because, like I said, like I would make really big things. And eventually I'm going to make an amount of sweaters that I can't wear.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, what is something? And also when people are so sweet, they're like, I want to commission you to make me a sweater, but sweaters take me a long time to make. Or the yarn, like sometimes you can spend like $25 on a very nice skein of yarn. And I don't feel comfortable charging people $400 for a cardigan,
right?
Which, if I'm being honest, that's, time spent plus the amount of materials.
Yeah.
So I feel like socks are something that I can make, that I can easily gift. And that's like me bringing over a loaf of sourdough to friends, or because that for me as an artist is like, I'm going to be making these things regardless. And they're either going to build up in my house. I'm either going to sell them or I'm going to give them away, and it's a combination of all three. But I will constantly be doing it. So socks seem like a way to do it and then also give it away cost effectively and not feel I'm not spending $400 and giving away my art for free, as Chicago artists always seem to do.
Yeah. Yeah. So socks are then something that you're maybe only spending, is a pair of socks maybe one skein of yarn?
Yeah, like one or two kind of thing. And it just depends on like the type of yarn you get. But I want to be able to have that be my boredom buster.
Yeah. That makes sense. Because then I hear you. You're not giving someone hundreds of dollars of just in materials, not including time. And it kind of evens out that. I'm really struggling to find words, but I hear you on finding like, what is a thing that I can knit and use the skill of knitting on and gift, but not feel like I'm just giving away the shop.
Yeah, exactly. I also feel like I normally have like 3 things on my needles at all times, because you'll have a project that will take a month and a half or whatever to make.
Yeah.
And then you're just like, I want to feel completion and satisfaction of completing something that I'm not tied to. So I want something that I could do in 2 weeks or if I could get good at it. Some people are like doing them on flights in 4-hour stints. They're like, oh, here's socks. And people have been doing it.
I remember hearing from my chemistry professors, because that's what my undergrad was in, that people who went into cancer research, that they were saying that people that get that if you're on research projects that won't have an end in your lifetime, that it's important to pull those people out. You pull somebody out for 6 months to do a chemistry project that had an end in sight.
Yeah.
That if you're doing a massive project that is never going to be over, that you have to have something that ends sometimes. And it's almost the opposite of a sabbatical, but it is take them out of the endless project and give them something with a completion. And then it recharges you and you can go back into the big project.
That makes so much sense, especially like applying it to like these quarantine times, is because we don't have any time frame. That's why we're so depressed. It's because we were like manic at the beginning of this, because we're like, okay, we can get through 2 months, we can get through this. And now that we don't have any definition of time, I struggle to find the point in doing something if I don't know when I'm going to be able to get to do it again. Like, why should I write comedy now if I'm not going to be on a stage in front of a paying audience until 2022?
Yeah.
There's no point.
It is really hard. I'm president of my synagogue, and we're having some really big and difficult conversations right now of what is Jewish communal life look like when you can never physically safely be inside a building together.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, and comedy is a communal art. And how do these arts they'll have a future, but this interim time, I think you're really right that we don't know when it's going to end. We can be very hopeful that January 20th will be the start of a new beginning. And then we'll get some real answers and get some real clarity. But we're 4 days away from the election, and who knows?
We need to find those short projects that can volley us into, happiness while we are in this weird suspension. And I think that's why we work on these podcasts. We do these things that we do have to start and end date. And yes, we don't necessarily know where they're going to lead, but at least they are done and they are complete while everything else is in chaos.
Yeah. See, we had an hour. We were able to talk for an hour, and you thought you wouldn't have anything to say.
It's hard for me. I know I was like, I don't do podcasts very much because I find I'm always paranoid I'm going to get marble mouth and that I'm not going to be clear. I always find it hard to speak extemporaneously.
Yeah.
But I was like, no, let's talk to a human today. How about that?
We'll talk using audio words and not just the texting words.
Yes, exactly.
So where can people find you online? Is there anything you want to plug? Your Hot Dog USA, City USA? I think if people just find me on Twitter, that generally links to everything. My Etsy, my name is Thea Lux. It's spelled THEALUX, and that's basically how you can find me. So I'm the only one named that, for better or for worse. You are incredibly Googleable.
I know.
Your parents did right by you. We will make her easy to find on the internet that doesn't exist yet.
What?
And you're still running your weekly Zoom open mic?
Mm-hmm. I have I'm happy to have Alt Coast participate. It's Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Pacific. If you look up slotted.co/routine mic. And only nice people are allowed. I'm sorry. Those are the rules. You can't be a dick. I don't want any of your transphobic material that is happening in the enclosed spaces of in-person comedy. I don't need any of that. This is for nice people, and only 9 comics, so you're out in an hour.
It is so much easier to get rid of assholes now, isn't it?
Yes.
You just kick them out of them. You're like, oh, You don't have to get them off the stage. You don't have to cut their mic. You just kick them out of the Zoom.
Yeah. And I kind of made it so like I only really advertise my mic through my own personal social channels so that I know that people coming to it are going to be nice folks. And that's the way I like it.
That's great. Because this is an extension of what you had been doing at Geeky Teas, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I ran an open mic there at Geeky Teas, which is a great comic book store, tea emporium, game store, not comics, game and tea emporium and cat rescue place. So
cat rescue?
Yeah, she's not there right now, but my fat young cat, that's where we got her. So Donna and Eric have a very wonderful space that is open, with limited hours. So you can still go buy games there now, which is great. But they're not doing live events, obviously. So we ran a showcase there and 2 open mics, but those will be in the future. Right now, I was just doing something so we could check in with comic friends, make sure everyone's making it and still alive, and those who need a deadline can have it.
Well, that's fantastic. So thank you, Thea. This has been super fun.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to Finding Favorites with Leah Jones. Please make sure to subscribe and drop us a 5-star review on iTunes. Now, go out and enjoy your favorite things.